Vamos a recibir primero a Lisa Herrera para que nos cuente acerca de las perspectivas de la situación de la lengua para refugiados e inmigrantes en Canadá. Y luego Andrea Godoy Zamur, Jennifer Laniuli Pacheco Álvarez y Vera Lucía Benedicto nos contarán acerca de la experiencia de São Paulo. Pero primero le damos la bienvenida a Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Herrera, and I'm the lead instructional coordinator for the LINC program at ISSofBC in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I've worked in the LINC program for the last 25 years. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the British Council for the invitation and the opportunity to be part of this conference and to present to you today. Today I'm going to talk about the Canadian government response to the current world refugee situation, which in Canada we unofficially refer to as Operation Syrian Refugee, and the structure of the Canadian model for delivering programs and services to serve the needs of immigrants and refugees. I'll spend most of the time talking about the LINC program structure and approach to increasing the English ability and the Canadian cultural knowledge of immigrants and refugees, which builds resilience and fosters participation in Canadian society. And finally, I'll talk about some unique language programming responses from the organization that I work for, ISSofBC, to further welcome, engage, and connect newcomers, including refugees, directly to community members and institutions. I was interested, I think it was Mike that said this morning about the moral imperative to help refugees. At a recent conference that I attended that was sponsored by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, which is the federal funder of the LINC program, a representative of that ministry spoke of Canada's moral imperative to help refugees and to welcome the most vulnerable to our country, as a way of explaining the Canadian government response and the large amount of tax dollars being spent on the refugee initiative in Canada. Between November 4th, 2015 and January 29th, 2017, Canada welcomed 40,081 Syrian refugees. Of those, 21,876 were government-sponsored refugees, 14,274 were privately sponsored refugees, sponsored by what we call the Group of Five private citizens, and 3,931 blended visa office referred refugees, which is UNHCR refugees matched with private sponsors. Currently, the government has a 3-year plan to bring in about a million immigrants, newcomers to Canada, over the next 3 years. Of those, between 43,000 and 48,000 in each of the next 3 years will be refugees, including between 16,000 and 17,000 per year that will be granted protected person status if they are seeking asylum. So while responsibility for refugees resettlement is federal, the Canadian government considers that partners play a crucial role in the success of this initiative. Provinces and territories in Canada, private sponsors, service providers, other departments within the Government of Canada, and ordinary Canadians all play roles. In fact, the Canadian government does not directly deliver any services to immigrants and refugees. Settlement supports and services are provided by specialized service provider organizations, or SPOs, or we sometimes call them SPOs, who are granted funding on a yearly renewable contract basis. This approach is more cost-effective and also allows for a better concentration of effort within communities by providers who know the local needs and are invested in making the program succeed. Once they are in Canada, all resettled refugees, both government-funded and privately sponsored, have access to the full suite of settlement supports and services that are provided by SPOs. These supports and services help refugees integrate and build a successful life in Canada as quickly as possible. And they include language assessment and training to achieve settlement and integration goals, support to build networks and communities, to build connections between newcomers and community members, public institutions, employers, and community organizations. One-on-one and group mentoring, child and youth leadership and peer support projects, and information and orientation on finding and retaining employment. The Canadian government approach centers around civic and labor market engagement for newcomers in meaningful and lasting ways. So, for example, while newcomers themselves certainly benefit from services and connections provided by volunteer Canadian mentors and hosts, newcomers themselves are encouraged to volunteer in the community through federally funded volunteer programs like the volunteer program that we have at ISSofBC. This is as opposed to relying on those ethnic communities to organize the volunteering themselves. Similarly, in employment, the federal government recognizes that sustained employment involves more than learning technical language for industry. Canadian cultural skills, or soft skills for the workplace, play a large role in employment success for newcomers. The federal government would like to make employers as responsible as agencies for getting newcomers where they need to be by helping the employers understand what the newcomers need in order to participate and succeed in the Canadian workplace. This approach of involving Canadian community members and employers in the settlement process has the intended side effect of not only serving the needs of newcomers, but also raising the awareness and empathy of the public in newcomer and refugee situations and building relationships as individuals. Newcomers become neighbors, co-workers, and friends instead of being unknown threats to the economy and security. The sustainability of the refugee program in Canada is built on accountability of SPOs for the dollars that they receive. The allocation for newcomer programs is based on the previous 3 years of immigration to each province, which is not a perfect system since it doesn't take into account internal migration from province to province. In some areas, such as the province I come from, BC, this has led to wait lists for language services. It can also lead to fluctuations in programming and services when immigration numbers to some communities seems to slow and then funding is cut. However, despite these issues, the Canadian government does have a commitment to settlement and integration. In 2018-2019, in that fiscal year, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is investing $1 billion to support the settlement needs of newcomers and refugees. So there are two levels in which SPOs are accountable for service delivery and funds received. The first is external to the funders, the federal, provincial, and municipal governments, as well as the private charitable foundations like the United Way and the Vancouver Foundation that provide funding to organizations like ISSofBC. For the federal government, SPOs regularly report on settlement outcomes, as well as completing very detailed financial monitoring. Accountability is built directly into the program and the delivery model. Programs and services are expected to be cost-effective, but SPOs are also expected to spend all the money they are given. Dollars not spent are weighed as support not offered to immigrants and refugees. In addition, the Canada Revenue Agency has regulations for SPOs, such as ISSofBC, that are registered charities. So charities must have a constitution and bylaws, prepare yearly accounting reports of how funds are expensed, and there's limits on percentages that can be spent on administration. Similarly, in BC, the provincial government also has a Societies Act with regulations that include having a constitution and bylaws and an annual general meeting of members of the society, as well as yearly reporting requirements. So the second level of accountability of SPOs is internal to their own mission statement, what the SPO has set out to achieve for the benefit of the community. The mission statement is first and foremost in the terms of the type of programming that is offered and of measuring achievement. At ISSofBC, for example, our mission statement is helping immigrants build a future in Canada. We are accountable to our board of directors and to the public to diligently and responsibly meet this mission statement in all the work that we do. I'd now like to address the LINC program model for the integration of immigrants and refugees in Canadian society. Since 1992, the Canadian government has funded a national English language training program that is offered free to immigrants and refugees called Language Instruction for Newcomers to Canada, or LINC. The LINC program teaches task-based, settlement-focused English for social integration and access to employment, with outcomes to connect newcomers to the community and prepare them for Canadian citizenship. Immigrants and refugees from diverse ethnic, socioeconomic, educational, and employment backgrounds are placed together in classes based solely on their entry level of English. Newcomers, including refugees, consistently report that gaining language skills and employment are their top priorities. A recent report on the Refugee Initiative in BC provided a language profile indicating that most refugees, 74%, came to BC with a beginner level of English, and 12% had no English at all. The Canadian government's priority is to help newcomers achieve a level of language adequate for citizenship. Language levels are measured by the Canadian language benchmarks. The level for citizenship is CLB4, which is an upper beginner level of English. A newcomer with CLB4 level of English can listen, speak, read, and write enough to understand basic rights and responsibilities, get their basic needs in the community met, and hold down an entry-level job. The majority of funding for LINC is allocated to CLB 1 to 4 classes, although classes up to CLB 8 may be funded in certain areas, and we do have those in BC, but across the prairies, there's very little funding for higher-level English. Of the $1 billion allocated to newcomer services in 2018, 36%, or about $400 million, will be allocated to language training across the country. So in LINC, newcomers do not learn about English in the grammar-based method that is most common to English teaching in many international contexts. The methodology is still interactive and communicative, but newcomers learn practical, immediate, everyday English to complete real-world tasks in the community and the workplace. So for example, newcomers learn how to understand instructions given at work, how to make a doctor's appointment, how to read notices from their children's school, how to fill in applications, how to write emails for social and business contexts. Even at the lowest level classes, CLB 1, where students will come in with only some words and maybe some rote sentences that they know how to say, the focus is on communication over correctness and increasing the ability of learners to independently address their social, commercial, and workplace needs. Over time, as learners progress through classes, they develop increasing complexity and fluency of language, and for more situations and with a greater variety of vocabulary. All permanent residents are eligible for LINC, and learners can stay in LINC classes until they achieve citizenship or reach the end of the funded programming. We will have many students who come in at CLB 1 and will stay with us for a couple of years in CLB 1, and that's, let's say, a 5-day-a-week class, 3 hours per day. And many students will go through levels and stay with us for 4 or 5 years, again, 4 or 5 days per week at about 3 hours per day for a class. LINC is learner-centered. The tasks that are pursued by classes are based on needs assessment and goal setting that are done by learners in areas such as health, housing, transportation, employment, and for learning about Canada's laws, institutions, and culture. A key feature of LINC is connecting newcomers directly with the community through interactions on field trips and with guest speakers. Guest speakers in particular allow other institutions, such as our transit corporation, public health, and public utilities. It gives them the ability to connect with immigrants and deliver important information that our immigrant community might otherwise miss. Community-based LINC classes in immigrant-serving organizations such as mine are also able to make referrals to other support and skills training programs. The Canadian Language Benchmarks document, available at language.ca, provides a national standard of language ability for LINC classes, for placement, teaching, assessment, and progression. Assessment in LINC is portfolio-based, developed and delivered in the class by trained teachers. Portfolio-based language assessment, or PBLA, is a uniquely Canadian initiative that was rolled out in LINC beginning in 2014, in part to increase the reliability of results and accountability of programs across the country. Because it is classroom-based, teachers can focus on the real-life, immediate needs of the learners and assess their language ability for the real world, rather than teaching toward a standardized test. PBLA employs an assessment for learning approach and encourages learner responsibility and accountability for their own learning. PBLA therefore empowers learners by teaching learners language so that they can identify their own learning preferences and that they can reflect on their progress toward their personal learning goals. Learners are encouraged to take charge of their own learning. LINC's practical real-world approach to language training and assessment builds resilience in newcomers and communities. So to begin, LINC provides access to education, training, and employment. Language is obviously the cornerstone of successful settlement and integration. Lack of language and cultural knowledge leads to social isolation, as well as lowered economic prospects. LINC is free to all permanent residents, making it easier for all socioeconomic levels of newcomers to improve their language skills for interacting in the community and for obtaining and retaining employment. Some LINC classes provide free childcare so that parents can attend classes. Transportation subsidies for low-income clients are provided also to enable attendance. Refugees are given priority access to LINC. Some LINC classes have an employment or workplace focus, so clients whose primary goal is to work can learn language and soft skills to get jobs and succeed in the Canadian work environments. In all LINC classes, newcomers learn what to expect from Canadians in terms of boundaries and social customs, leading to greater understanding and less friction and social mistakes on the part of newcomers. Secondly, LINC promotes learning together and social cohesion through connecting to community. All permanent residents are eligible for LINC without a test of means. Immigrants and refugees from diverse ethnic, socioeconomic, educational, and employment backgrounds are placed together in classes based solely on their entry level of English. This means that a billionaire Asian investor can be sitting side by side a Syrian refugee as equals, giving them opportunity to learn about each other and develop respect and tolerance that they would likely never have the opportunity to do outside of a LINC classroom. And I draw that reference directly to a couple of students that I know that are sitting together in one of our CLB1 classes, a billionaire Asian investor and a Syrian refugee. Canada is multicultural and accepting of diverse religions, cultures, and sexual orientations. Some newcomers are not used to such diversity. Being in a LINC class introduces newcomers to different religious and cultural practices and LGBTQ2 issues with the message that acceptance is a Canadian value and expected of citizens. Of course, this also reflects to newcomers that they are accepted with the differences that they bring to Canada. In this way, LINC offers safe spaces and a message of inclusion to mitigate the effects of trauma that many refugees experienced in their journey to Canada. Teachers in LINC, particularly at the lower levels, which see many of the Syrian refugees, are made aware of the possible signs of trauma that could be exhibited by refugees and to be proactive in referring students to settlement services for help. Teachers in these levels are very careful with topics that could trigger painful memories, such as talking about family. Learners are also taught language to protect their privacy and dignity, such as learning, "I'd rather not say." I'm going to flip through. There's a couple of slides here about ISSofBC. I'll just quickly sort of flip through them. Maybe I'll just go back to this one. Just give you a quick. ISSofBC is the largest immigrant serving organization in Western Canada. We have services that are delivered throughout ISSofBC, throughout BC. In Vancouver, ISSofBC operates Welcome Centre, which is where most of the government-sponsored refugees to BC are received, and they're put up in apartments until we find them housing. And it's also a place that we have partner organizations working under the same roof. So it's a one-stop shop, and it's quite unique in the world in terms of being a space that refugees can get all their needs met. So these are the three things that we do at ISSofBC. We do settlement, we do language training, and we do employment. We served about 12,000 clients in the last year in all of these three areas. And this is just a photo of the British royal couple that visited Welcome Center and visited with one of our refugee families in September 2016. ISSofBC does have an international reputation. We have presented programming in many countries in Europe. We've received delegations from most European countries and China and Korea and United Nations ambassadors. We also have a current application for funding to work with Australian NGOs to do a joint project on employment for refugees. And we have a project in China exploring the Canadian refugee programming model to assist China with their own internally displaced persons from rural areas who are moving to urban areas. Okay, so I'll just briefly talk about a couple of programs that we do that further connects immigrants and refugees. So one of ISSofBC's unique language programs is a partnership with LINC and our volunteer services program. So we recognized in 2005 that many of our immigrants and refugees don't have a large amount of opportunity to speak English outside of their classroom. So what we do is we pair volunteers in the community with immigrants and refugees in our CLB 3 and 4 classes, those classes that are close to citizenship level. And they do outings after school and on the weekends, so in the evenings and on the weekends. So LINC clients gain the opportunity to practice listening and speaking English and to explore places and events in the community one-on-one with a volunteer friend. Even though the programs usually run between 8 and 12 weeks, some of those volunteer pairs will stay together for years and years afterwards. Learning in Action volunteers have opportunity to make a positive contribution to the community and to learn firsthand about the experiences of immigrants and refugees, to develop skills for interacting with peoples with lower levels of English. Another program that we have, which is unique to our head office in our Vancouver location, is the opportunity for LINC students to meet and interact with the Vancouver Police Department in their classes and one-on-one at the ISSofBC premises. So many newcomers, including refugees, particularly refugees, do not have positive views of police based on experiences in their home countries. In Canada, the police strive to connect with the community as a service rather than just law enforcement. A Vancouver Police Department liaison officer stationed at Welcome Centre does presentations in LINC classes to introduce policing in Canada, to communicate their rights to newcomers, and to reduce clients' fear of interacting with police. The best aspect of these presentations are they are not done through translators, but by the liaison officer adjusting his language level to the English level of the students in the class. This approach allows even our lowest level clients to feel that they can interact with the police even with very limited English. It makes it more likely for clients to approach police in the community for support or safety rather than thinking that they need someone to speak for them. The partnership between the Vancouver Police Department and ISSofBC LINC is unique in Canada. And the very last one here, we do have a lot of wonderful programming at ISSofBC, but I'll just talk about this one briefly. This is language programming that is supported by partnership with employers. So TechStart is a partnership project involving key stakeholders, ISSofBC, Startland Tech, which is 3 training academies, Red Academy, Code Core, and Lighthouse Labs, and then several Metro Vancouver tech employers. The project focuses on preparing and training refugees for entry-level work in the tech sector. TechStart is a 4-month, full-time program providing refugees with job readiness, coaching, language instruction, and intensive boot camp training to prepare them for a career in the tech sector. TechStart participants learn from Vancouver's top code academies to gain the coding skills and knowledge to become junior developers, and then successful participants are interviewed by employers who have expressed an interest in hiring refugees. Oops. And that concludes my presentation about the LINC program and ISSofBC program. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Lisa. Recibimos entonces a Andrea Godoy Samur y Vera Lucía Benedito, que nos van a contar acerca de la experiencia de la Prefectura de São Paulo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the Municipal Secretary of Human Rights and Citizenship from São Paulo, Andrea, Cristina, Jennifer Anoeli, for the invitation, and also the British Council for providing this wonderful opportunity this afternoon through the exchange and learning processes. I'm Vera Lúcia Benedito. I'm a little bit hoarse, okay? I'm Vera Lúcia Benedito. I'm representing the Municipal Secretary of Education in São Paulo. I also coordinate the Center for Race and Ethnic Relations in São Paulo, and I will talk a little bit more about that a little further. I just promise you, I will not make the speech longer, just the necessary. I will start by saying that thanks to the bottom-up activism of refugee and immigrant population in São Paulo, we have a law for immigrant communities in Brazil. São Paulo is the first city to do that, and is the law 16478 of 2016. It's one of the most important laws. As we do not have the time to go over the intricacies of this law, and also all the outreach that ranges through housing, education, health, and social and political actions of immigrants in the city, including social and political representation. I will just start by saying the sole paragraph, which is very important for all of us. How we define immigrant population. For purpose of this law, are all individuals who move from their place of habitual residence to another country or to Brazil, including labor migrants, students, refugees, and asylum seekers, stateless persons, and their families, regardless of their legal status and documentation. This is important and commands the whole spectrum of the law. And the law has some principles that are very important for us, that we deal in the area of education. For instance, one of the principles has to do with equal rights and opportunities based upon specific needs of immigrant population. The second, universality, indivisibility, and interdependence of immigrants' human rights. And the third, fight against xenophobia, racism, prejudice, and all kinds of discrimination. Article 7 goes straight to the point where it guarantees that all children, adolescent, young, adult immigrants, the right to education in the network of municipal public education through its access. Number one, access is an international legal mandate, so we guarantee that. Permanence, and also the ability to leave the school with success, terminality. And second, has to do with valuing the cultural diversity, ensuring the participation of the immigrant population in the cultural agenda of the city. This is very interesting. Observing that openness to cultural occupation of public spaces and fostering cultural production. Excuse me. I think I'm nervous because I'm getting rough, almost not speaking. But anyhow, the work we do regarding the coordination of the race and ethnic relations is anchored in one very important concept that is the intercultural concept. that it underlines our actions, the way we do things, the way we promote actions in the city through the cultural and educational system in São Paulo. One of them has to do with the mandate of the law for 3 populations, and all these 3 laws, they were guaranteed from the bottom-up approach of the communities. The first one, that the law 10639 of 2003, that Africans and Afro-Brazilians guaranteed their rights to have their history and culture being taught in the school system is law for public and private school systems in Brazil. The second one has to do with the indigenous population through the law 11645 from 2008 that guarantees that indigenous people, they also have the right to have their history being told to school children, to the high school system. It's the law. No matter what, you have to have it. And the third one has to do with the immigrant population that we just had this law since 2016, 16478, that guarantee that the history and culture of immigrant population also being taught in all the school system. This particular law has to do with São Paulo, primarily. Right? It's very interesting. São Paulo is a very big city, has almost 600 schools, and that ranges from kindergarten to high school system. And yet, until a few years ago, when we talked about the history of African Brazilians or indigenous people or immigrant population was like just en passant, a little bit of the history. Let's talk about Afro-Brazilians, let's talk about slavery. That's it. After slavery, what happened in the country? We have the second largest populations of African descendant population in the world. We are 54% of the population. It's not possible that our history ends in 1888. Many things happened from that. What we know about it. If we do not know our history, we cannot recognize who we are. So that's why the law is important. The same thing for indigenous people. We have more than 200 groups of people in this country. And we rarely say good morning in any native language. This is a shame. This is a shame. And the same thing with the immigrant population. But guess what? Through this center, we have been able to provide actions throughout the year, not only in specific dates, even though these 3 populations, they have months where we celebrate the African and Afro-Brazilian culture. That is November, the Black November. We celebrate the culture of indigenous people in August, Agosto Indígena, Indigenous August. And we celebrate the culture of immigrant in Immigrant December. There are 20 days that all the entire school system through its 13 units promote some actions involving cultural agenda, cultural presentation, lectures, as well as networks. What it means to all of that? We have to learn, we have to understand what is the culture of the other, so we can respect since the beginning. So if we know what each culture representing in the city, in the country, know and do throughout history, we can respect, we can value, we can appreciate, and we can really, really open us to the intercultural value and concepts that I just mentioned before. So, as of July of 2017, Brazil, São Paulo primarily, is becoming more and more and more diverse with the South-South immigration in our country. We had 4,790 immigrants in the city of São Paulo, only in the city of São Paulo, representing more than 81 countries in the world. The 10 largest groups in the city are what? Bolivia, Angola, Haiti, Japan, Paraguay, Peru, Argentina, Congo, Colombia, Syria, and since last year, we have almost 150 representations from Venezuelans. So more and more so, the school system, the municipal school system in São Paulo is becoming globalized. And this is, rather than being something negative, when people see immigrants like a threat, we see this as an opportunity. Opportunity to learn, opportunity to integrate, opportunity to exchange. And that is something that we do. And one of the things that we do has to do with the Portas Abiertas, that my open doors, open doors. My friend Andrea, Cristina, she will talk about. It's a partnership between the Secretary of Education and Secretary of Human Rights and Citizenship, which is very important because it provides not only for students, but also for their families and the communities, the ability to speak the language, to speak Portuguese. Many of you spoke this morning about the importance of language resilience, language acquisition as the first social tool for inclusion and also citizenship. If you do not have these tools, it's very difficult to navigate through the system, navigate through the labor market, navigate through the housing, and so forth. So this is a very important program. And also, we have different programs also that are geared toward immigrants that are scattered throughout the city, but we do not have the same intensity and efficiency as the Portas Abiertas that Andrea will speak about it. One thing that is very important when we talk about Portuguese for immigrants is that all the students enrolled in these courses, they are immediately they are part of the school system. It's not just a kind of a course that you do and forget about it. For every single level that students go through, they receive an official certificate. Also, that is, they can move toward the system legally, not just, in one more course. So I just said everything I needed to say. I'm not speaking much today because I'm hoarse, but it was just a pleasure. And if you have any questions about what we do throughout the year with this all three populations, and primarily the immigrant population, I'll be more than glad to talk to you. Thank you very much. Andrea.
Good afternoon. Wow, hoarseness is a problem today with Brazilians. Thank you, Vera, for this explanation. Thank you so much. It's a big pleasure to be here with you today to talk a little bit about our work in the city of São Paulo. So as Vera just said, she started explaining a little bit of what we do in the Education Secretariat, and I will lead you through the work that we do in the Human Rights Secretariat, and then together in our project, our joint project, the Open Doors. Okay, so just to give you guys a little background about our work, I am the director. My name is Andrea Zamur. I am the director of the Department of Policies for Migrants and Promotion of Decent Work in the city of São Paulo. And this structure was established in 2013. It is the first and remains the only subnational structure that deals with policies specific for the migrant population in Brazil. So it was a pioneer activity of the Municipality of São Paulo. And it really stems from the acknowledgement that even though, of course, national authorities have a lot to say in terms of migration, local authorities also should be involved, and the local government is very much responsible for making sure that migrants and refugees are well integrated into society. Regarding, we have many different policies that we can talk about. One of our flagships today is our municipal policy that Vera already addressed. It's a policy that was thought of together with the government, lots of representation from our municipal government and also from the civil society. So we had a committee that thought about this law, that discussed this law, and when it was enacted in 2016, it is also the only municipal policy for migrants in Brazil. It was a big victory for all of us, and it really gives us direction and guidance into what mainstreaming migration into our municipal public policies mean. So this is our big, the law is our big guide in the things that we do. But I'm gonna highlight some of our projects that have to do with education, and then that really dialogue with our Open Door project. So access to information and public services. We have a guide that we made a couple of years ago that states all rights that migrants have access to in the city of São Paulo. This is the little guide. I think some of you, we had some over there, if some of you got. It's translated into 7 languages, and it talks about from education to health access and employment and housing, and it's really pretty, and I don't know, you should take a look at it at some point. Also, with respect to interculturality and provision of adequate services, we have a one-stop shop called the Reference and Assistance Center for Migrants. It's a public and free service that is, it offers specific assistance and orientation to immigrants, also in many different languages. One of the great things about the service is that all people that work there are migrants as well. So if you're a migrant and you go there, you have access to people that not only speak your language but also know what you're going through and can guide you better through this integration process. We also provide capacity building to public servants and professionals working directly with the immigrant population, because at this point, since Professor Vera already told you, since one of our guiding principles in public policies in São Paulo is that migrants have universal access to all the services that are available to nationals. At this point, we're past the access to services, and we are really trying to address the quality of this service that they have access to. So capacity building for the public servants is one of the most important things that we've been doing lately. And also, we partner with different educational institutions for technical training of migrants, promotion of decent work. And there's also this São Paulo City Hall's diversity seal, which is with regard to migrant population. It recognizes companies and entrepreneurs and employers that hire migrants in their business as well. So finally, talking about our big project here, the Open Doors project, Portuguese for Migrants. It's also, for us, it's a pioneer initiative. It's the first time in Brazil that Portuguese classes are given in the public service. And I'm talking not only in the municipal level, but in state level or the national level. This does not exist in Brazil. So this is something that we worked really hard to make come true. One of the things, so our three main points here that justify why we put together this project, why we decided that this was so important for us. So, of course, as many of you have already noted today, language knowledge is essential for promoting immigrants' access to social and economic rights, particularly regarding the insertion of migrants in the formal job market. So this is the first thing. But also, we knew that we had a necessity that courses be offered in different regions of the city. São Paulo is a gigantic city. We have over 12 million people only in the city area. I'm not even talking about the metropolitan area. And it's a large city geographically. And lately, we've been seeing that because of prices in rent, and I think that's true for most cities, a lot of migrants that before used to gather around downtown are now having to scatter through neighborhoods that are further away from the center of the city because of prices, because of rent prices. So we have migrants living in the north region, in the south region, in the east region, everywhere, and it's really hard for them to, if they had to come downtown to access these services, would be much less likely that they would access this program. We also had a concern that Portuguese as a second language be taught as a formal public policy. Many organizations have been teaching Portuguese languages for years in Brazil, and I think this is also true for many countries. Religious organizations and many other civil society organizations. But for us, we really acknowledge the responsibility as the public sector that we should allow this, we should enable this as a public policy that would be lasting, that would be a government program and would not depend on private funding. So it's something that we can allow with public funding. So for us, this was also very important. So how did we develop this methodology to implement this project? The first thing was, as the Human Rights Secretariat, we are mainly responsible for coordinating with other secretariats in the city to make sure that migration is mainstreamed into every policy existing in the city. So the first thing that we did was, let's talk to the Education Secretariat and see how we can make this work the best way possible. We don't have the budget to do this by ourselves, so let's talk to our good friends over there so that they can help us. So it's the shared responsibility among different sectors of the public government put into action. We had to establish an intersecretarial ordinance which judicially enabled, formalized our project, and we had to think about how we're gonna give these classes, how we're gonna hire new people, what's the material we're gonna use. So we're gonna talk about partnerships in a little bit, but we were able to produce a custom tailored material for this course, which is this one. We also had some samples over there. This is something that we designed alongside our partners that I'm going to talk about in a bit. We also have custom tailored teacher trainings for the teachers that are involved in these classes. And these teachers are the same teachers that teach in our kids in school in the morning. So they teach they teach the children in the morning and in the afternoon and at night. A lot of them are teaching the parents now because it's all the same, but they're being trained specifically for this. So the teachers are from the Municipal Education Network. And we, as also many of the projects that were discussed here, we don't limit our methodology to fostering the acquisition of language proficiency. We also really want to make sure that our students, that we are imparting a broader understanding of our local context in the city and of the migrants' rights in the city, because we ultimately aim at having migrants being well integrated into the city and making sure that they are able to exchange with the São Paulo, with Brazilians that live in São Paulo, in an intercultural exchange way of seeing things. So it's inserted in schools' pedagogical projects. This is very important because it asks us to mobilize schools and the regional units in which the city is divided. São Paulo is divided into 13 regional units for school-wise. And we have to really mobilize these regional units. We have to mobilize schools themselves because they have to really embrace this project and make it a part of their pedagogical work. So this is also super important because we really, once they embrace the project, once they are teachers and communities, they think that this is worth doing. This also speaks a lot of why the immigrants themselves want to take the courses and stay in the courses and make the most out of it. Those are face-to-face courses. They're you have to go to classes. We don't have an online course yet, but that's something that we're thinking about. Classes of 15 to 20 students of different nationalities and language backgrounds. And this is very interesting because all of the teachers that we spoke to, they talk about how students help themselves. So if you have a Syrian in a class and you have a Nigerian and they have different backgrounds, but they really try to help each other out, and it doesn't really matter their backgrounds because things work out anyways. Usually classes are at night or suited to students' demands. They could be in the afternoon or in the morning, but usually at night. 90 hours in each module. We have basic, intermediate, and advanced levels. One important thing. We just started this last semester, so this is all one semester of work. Now we're going into our second semester, so we're going to have more to say about this in a while. And this EOL student registration is what Vera was saying, that all students that are part of this, they become a part of the municipal network of schools. So they are a student in our municipal system. It's not just a little course that they do on the side. They are really part of the school community. And that's important for us. So just talking a little bit about partnerships. So one of the things that that really enabled us to do this course when I talked about methodology was really crafting this material. And this was possible because we searched partnerships with different organizations, in particular with the Language Center of the University of São Paulo. Our teacher Marina is here. She's this Marina Reynolds, who helped elaborate this material. And we also partner with our one-stop shop, the Reference and Assistance Center for Migrants, not only because they know a lot about the reality, because they work directly with migrants all the time, but also because when teachers are teaching these migrants, lots of concerns come up, lots of problems, and teachers don't really know how to address them. So we have a circular, so we refer students to the classes through also the work of CRY that helps with the dissemination and publicity of the courses. But then once the students are in classes, teachers hear about their problems and then they refer it back to CRY so that we can help solve them. And I'm wrapping up as well my presentation. So this is a big challenge that we have been working with since it's a new program. It's very important for us that we talk about it and we disseminate that this project exists. So we have printed materials. We have to go around schools. We hand out flyers. We have digital materials that are in all our official web channels and social networks, newspapers, local media, and we talk with our promotion partners, consular entities, civil society organizations, to make sure that people know about this course and that we can make the most out of it. So in our first semester, we had 352 enrolled students, 229 goers, and 234 graduates. We had 80% conclusion tax. We had 9 schools in this huge city here. They're mostly in the north and in the east part of the city. Our main nationalities, Haitians are the first nationality, Bolivia, Colombia, and you can see here. And for 2018, we have the perspective of expanding this project through other areas of the city. We just heard that, so for the second semester, we're going to have a few schools in the south region, which is important for us, and we're very excited about this. We're just starting, so thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this and show a little bit of what we're doing. I'm sorry if I'm speaking very fast. I'm trying to finish. If you have any questions, if you have any inputs to help us continue with this project and make it better as we can, thank you very much.